Just wanted to touch base on, we're going to cover three different things today. We're going to orient you to F.A.R.M. for those of you who have never heard of Farmers Assisting Returning Military. Great group here in Dallas. And then talk about amending soil and then those container gardens if you don't have land at home. Okay, so Hyiat, I'm going to turn it over to you then. We're so excited to hear more about F.A.R.M.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm grateful that you all invited me on behalf of F.A.R.M. to talk about what we do and the projects that we're working on, because soil obviously is what you need to grow things, but it's also we see soil as a big part of life in general. So F.A.R.M. Was established in 2014 by two Army veterans who were stationed in Fort Hood. And after deployment, they settled in Dallas. One of them, James Jeffers, who's 100% disabled with severe traumatic brain injuries, PTSD. Well, they both initially started going to Cedar Valley College for green building. But James couldn't really function at all because of his brain injuries. Like making a pot of coffee was no easy task for him. It was the small things that we take for granted on a daily basis. And they both had young families. And the other founder, Steve, will tell you that he went down a rabbit hole of organics to figure out why he couldn't eat ice cream anymore from the vaccinations and all these things. So they ended up tearing up their yards, growing food for their families. And it was so grounding and therapeutic for them that James, with the traumatic brain injury, within 6 months, he used to have to wear this like almost like a cell phone on his arm to remind him how to do things and how, with instructions on how to do it and all that stuff. Within 6 months of having his hands in the soil, he was able to remove that piece of technology and start doing those things again. And so just, it was the combination of getting their hands in the soil and eating, the produce that they were growing. What was around that time that they got wind of the 22 a day campaign, which is the 22 veterans that commit suicide every day. And to date, they've lost 14 guys in their unit to suicide, 12 on foreign soil, 14 on US soil, which is not okay. So because the being in the soil was so helpful to them, they ended up putting, well, actually, let me back up a little bit. They started Eat the Yard, which was a for-profit closed-loop edible landscaping and composting business in Oak Cliff. Well, after the campaign, they found out about, they put Eat the Yard on hold to start F.A.R.M. out of need. So it was founded in 2014. We started on 16 acres in DeSoto. And the whole point was to just try to, create that. Veterans, service members are very mission driven. They have a purpose. They're out there, they're doing it. They have their peers next to them. And so we wanted to create this space to renew that mission in them. And in farming and gardening and, even just weed pulling, there's a therapy to that, the repetition of it. So it's like getting out in the garden or out in the fields, you were able to open up and just like talk about things that you never really talked about before. Mm-hmm. And so we had this very holistic approach to healing, where to get away from the pharmaceuticals, soil, and then food being the number one medicine that you need. The funny thing is that a lot of the veterans that came into our program, they were amazing cooks, but none of them did that. They were taking a lot of pharmaceuticals. They were eating junk food. There was alcohol, substance abuse, all of that. So we created this space where there was that purpose, to get up every day because the plants needed tending to, the animals needed to be fed. There was that purpose for them to get up to that day, and that regimen that kept them going so their mind wouldn't go other places. And the last piece to it was the camaraderie. When service members leave the military, aside from that mission, one of the things they miss the most is that peer-to-peer support. So we created a space to be able to have that support. And, you know, studies have shown that soil parallel to pharmaceuticals, the soil works better. And we saw that in the veterans that came through our program. And so we've been very fortunate to have a community that has supported the organization and continues to support us. So that's kind of who we are in a nutshell. You know, we feel it's a way for veterans to continue their service to their communities by healing America's distressed food system. So you can find out more about our organization. We have opportunities for veterans and civilians alike to come together because we know that growing food, veterans don't own growing food. Veterans don't own PTSD and all of that. We, you know, humans in general, we all deal with those things. And I can say that from my own personal experience. I am not a veteran. I have been the token civilian of the organization. I came to the organization by way of working with chefs who pioneered the farm to table movement. And life happened for me. There was a lot of trauma I had experienced, and I was still functioning, but just existing. And when I met Steve and James, they invited me to the farm. I did some volunteering, and I knew I was here to help people in some way, somehow, but I just never really knew how. And the other thing is that I had no ties to agriculture or military. I honestly didn't want to have association to the military out of my own ignorances. But they invited me. They're my family now. They got my hands in the soil, and it saved my life because I didn't want to be here anymore. And so I've committed my life to this purpose because I know that there's a lot of people out there that experience those same things. And there's nothing better than getting back to the earth and really grounding yourself and, you know, building those relationships with the soil and being able to see the literal fruits of your labor and then nourishing your body with them. There's nothing more magical than that. So here I am, and here we go. So we do, this is kind of we have multiple programs. So we've had a 3 to 6 month internship that's currently on hold because of COVID, but we also provide assistance to veterans on their properties. We were in partnership with Texas A&M. They had a program called Battleground to Breaking Ground. And after we were an incubator farm that actually taught these veterans how to grow their own produce. So a lot of them were already somewhat in the agriculture space, but it was more livestock. So once the program was over and they learned about programs, federal programs like NRCS, that could give you high tunnels like you see on the right here, everybody decided to put up high tunnels at the same time. So we are high tunnel putting up machines. And, you know, that's one of the things about farming is, you know, you can't do it by yourself. You know, you have to have some kind of help. So in farming in general, there's a lot of isolation. So we try to be there when we can to help, you know, not just veteran farmers, but farmers in general.
And Hyiat, I've heard that before you install your own high tunnel, it's really informative if you can go out with someone else while they're installing their high tunnel, see the process, orient yourself to it before you set up your own high tunnel. And also you have another friend to ask questions if something were to happen. So I just wanted to mention, it sounds like you're a good source for that. And you know a lot of people who have put up high tunnels.
Yes, and I'm a little over them right now, but it's okay. It's part of the process. But yeah, I definitely recommend, you know, helping somebody else putting one up, not just for yourself to see what it's going to take, but just building that community because, you know, it's important. I mean, you build a community, they can come help you do something else on their farm. They may have a piece of equipment or, you know, manures that you could use, you know, to put in your soil. It's like this symbiotic relationship, you know, just like soil.
Yep, absolutely. I love it.
Yeah, so we did, like Kara mentioned, we had We incorporated a lot of animal husbandry, so it was always really nice having fresh eggs on the farm. Which, if you have space, you can have chickens in your yard. That was actually something that our founders helped change the ordinances of that back in 2010, I think it was. So yeah, I encourage chickens because there's nothing better than that. And then you get the manure out of it. So what you see here on the left is our operation that we had in DeSoto when we first started. Unfortunately, we don't have that space anymore. It was a 16-acre farm where we had a 12-bedroom house on it where we were housing veterans to go through a work, live, train, heal space. We didn't own it. And we ran into some issues, so we had to walk away from it. What you see on the right is me and one of the co-founders, Steve Smith, at our new project. This is the conceptual drawing of what we are working on now. We have just under 3 acres in downtown Dallas between the Farmers Market District and Deep Ellum. We are building it out to be an urban training and demonstration farm where we employ veterans to become those leaders in the community again, educating the community on how to grow their own food, nutrition, sustainability, all of that, but also demonstration pieces, like Kara mentioned earlier, on how you can do these things without land, because land is becoming more and more difficult to acquire, and you don't need land to grow food. Actually, one of my best friends who I worked with in the restaurant business, who kind of started slowly introducing me to the holistic world. She was a single mother living in an apartment, and her balcony was covered with 5-gallon buckets, growing all of her own food. And I was amazed by it. And now she has a 48-acre farm in Roxton, Texas, where she's building a complete homestead for her and her family. So yeah, these are just more conceptual pictures of what we hope it to be. This is where we're at right now. Some of you all might recognize it if you are driving on 75. It's on Good Latimer and Taylor, but if you're going 75 south on that 30 west, 30 east split, that 30 west split you'll see our farm right there. So we're doing it a little bit differently. We are building a demonstration farm on a parking lot because sometimes that's all you have.
Very creative use of space.
Yes. And, we're also contributing to removing what they call the heat island.
Absolutely. Okay, so now let's dive into what all you've done to create that beautiful soil.
So, a lot of times I talk to people and they always say, I don't have a green thumb. I just can't grow anything, and 9 times out of 10, it's not you. It really isn't. It's the soil. And it's really important to understand, those basics of soil. I was chatting with everybody before the call started, and, the soil is often thought of as the stomach of the earth, the digestive system, the processing system where, just like us as humans, that our gut health is so important to our overall health. So if you have any issues, go to your soil first. It's not you, don't give up. So there's so many different things to think about, and it's that soil, understanding the soil structure, all these things I've listed that we can go into some other slides, but I'll also talk about how we did it above ground. And so obviously, most of us don't think of this, but we just think of soil when we see the top layer of it, but there's so many things happening here. And because of where we're at, we're dealing with a lot of clay soil. Now, clay soil isn't necessarily bad. It does hold a lot of nutrients. It does retain a lot of water, but there's not a lot of oxygen that's able to flow through it. And only certain crops can thrive in that space. So you want to be able to understand what's going on underneath that surface level to really understand what you need for your soil. So what I recommend before doing anything is doing a soil test, so you know what you're working with. And if you have any contaminants or anything in your soil, or whatever nutrients you're lacking, that soil test will tell you. And you can get an easy soil test like from the hardware store, but there's more in-depth soil tests that you can take. Like we typically do send samples out to A&M, and they have different levels that you can test for.
And I just wanted to throw in there too, it's a lot easier to know what nutrients you need to specifically amend for if you do that soil test as well.
Right.
Very good.
So, like I said, clay rather, can hold a lot of water, but, or retain it rather, and you can grow some crops in it, typically more shallow rooting crops. But, once it gets wet, it gets really sludgy, and there's just not a whole lot you can do. So you can kind of see what we have here, the way the soil drains. So sand by itself is not necessarily good. The soil is just going to run straight through it. Clay holds it, but you need to be able to start mixing different amendments into those soils that we'll get to be able to retain the water, keep it moist, and help it, the nutrients be able to penetrate everything underneath to where you won't have to, once you start implementing organic matters to engineer that soil, you fertilize less, you water less, there's so many things that will initially takes a lot of work, but in the long run, it's more beneficial. And let me mention also that typically what they say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Kara, that amending of the soil and the engineering of the soil doesn't happen overnight. So as it's typically at that 3-year mark. So like I said, you can still be growing stuff as you're amending the soil. Those shallow root crops like greens are really good for them. Which, there's a few other things like peas and I'm drawing blanks right now, but
brassicas.
Yes.
Yeah, and legumes. So brassicas are like broccoli, kale. Those legumes like beans, peas.
Right.
Those are all really good. Yep. Black-eyed peas. Wanted to add in here something I forgot, but okay. Let's continue. If I think of it, I'll add that in. Oh, just the time. Yeah, the time that it takes to build up the soil. It really is like a fine wine. So like Hyiat said, if you plant something and it doesn't do well that year, just know you have made some small victory or contribution towards the soil in that year. The roots have started to break into the soil, and they're going to leave organic matter there to help break it up even further. So just know that it takes a while, but we're going to show you a few ways that you can speed up that process and get it moving along.
Don't forget, you're on Mother Nature's time, so you have to deal with it. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not at our convenience.
Right. And I'm the personality type where I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna get stuff done. All right, let's on to the next thing. And but that's one of the things that is very relaxing about being outside and in the garden. Yeah. It's like you are on Mother Nature's time, and it's just being outside is very peaceful.
Yeah, I mean, you have the soil, you have the vitamin D from the sunlight, you have just very therapeutic and meditative. So one of the things that we do is we make biochar. So what you see here is our bootleg version of a J-shaped rocket stove. And so we are sequestering carbon by burning wood through this rocket stove, and it's not letting off any kind of gases or anything. It's all holding it in there. And so basically, if you know what activated charcoal is, it's pretty much the same thing. And you only need very small amounts of it. And so, like I said, it sequesters carbon, and it also is great for retaining water and holding nutrients. It's actually one of those things that can hold nutrients longer than any other amendment to the soil. So I can't remember what the number was, like a teaspoon of it is enough for like a tennis court size space, you know. So we actually do the biochar and mix it into our compost. So then when we're ready to, if we're top dressing or we're putting in new crops, and you know, that biochar is in there. And there's different ways to make biochar. So you can definitely look that up and see, but this is an ancient method of creating an amendment for soil.
Great.
I think I read something like from 2,500 years ago that there was still traces of biochar from just the way they cooked in the ground kind of thing. And it was able to continue to, that soil where it was able to hold nutrients for that long.
Very cool.
So you got a layer for the long game. One of the things that obviously mulching is very important. We've gotten, one of our sources of mulch is wood mulch that we have connected with tree trimmers. They typically have to pay to drop their clippings places. So I went and cornered a bunch of people. And I was like, hey, just come drop it over here and we won't charge you, you know? So, you know, layering with mulch on top. So the thing is that you always want to protect your soil as when you're engineering it, when it is where it's at, you know, always protect your soil from the elements. To be able to hold all of that, the nutrients, the microbiome, all of that that's going on underneath the surface, you know, it's important to protect that. So wood mulch is good. We'll talk about different mulches later. Azomite is a rock dust that we use as a nutrient. Excuse me. Anyway, it provides micronutrients for plant growth. So we typically, before we plant anything, we have a mixture of like azomite, blood meal, bone meal, and chicken manures that we put together, and we spread it on our soil. But we turn it into the soil first before we plant anything, because those things they're providing nutrients for that clay. The particles in it are breaking down the clay, creating pathways for oxygen, and it's aerating it. And so typically what we do is we'll broad fork, which I was thinking I should have given you a picture of a broad fork, but it's one of my favorite tools if you ever need a workout. But broad fork your space. Broad forking allows you to aerate your soil, whether it's clay or not. And when you're putting this compost and this nutrients, it's allowing it to seep in and creating those microorganisms that continue to plume and help break down that heavy clay. One of the things that we did is inoculate with mushroom spores. So you'll see in some slides later that that we're creating just over a half an acre of above ground growing space, but we couldn't afford to bring in that much soil. So there, we kind of did the reverse method of the Eden method, and it was like 5 feet of mulch. But so we layered with heavy clay that was 5 feet of mulch to like grow it up. But what we did was inoculate it with mushroom spawn, and also you can get mushroom compost to mix into your compost that will help break down those things as well. And the mushrooms will start breaking down that wood mulch or anything that you have in your soil that will help the clay as well. If you're just starting in ground, one of the things that we do is solarize. Now we're not doing that at the space downtown because we're not going in the ground. But we would call billboard companies, and when they would take down their billboards, we would get it from them. We'd water our new plot and tarp it with the billboards, because you're solarizing and killing the grasses and the weeds and everything like that to expose the soil, and then you can start prepping it and amending it. And then when, you know, just And you just have to start caring for those soils and those plants and all of that. So we can go on to the next slide.
Hyiat, we have a question. What is top dressing?
We're actually going to get to that in just a second.
Okay.
It's a good question.
So here is how we started. This is the parking lot that we're building an urban farm. People think we're crazy, but I kind of think it's cool. What we did, one of the things I found out was when there are construction projects happening, all the soil they dig up, they just take it to the landfill. I had no idea. And so when they were doing all the demolition at the farmers market, I cornered one of the general contractors. I'm really good at cornering people when I need their stuff that they're just throwing away. He had the soil tested. It was clean. There was no, this was all coming, like they were building an underground parking lot. And it was clean, and so I had it diverted from going to the landfill and brought to the farm. Now what you're seeing is heavy clay, and that's what we did with our plots, is we lined the bottom of it with heavy clay to hold the water. And then it was a little bit difficult. If you go to the next slide, even though it was clean of contaminants, it wasn't clean of debris. So we did take a long time having to clean it out of rocks and bricks and all kinds of stuff. It was no easy task, but we had a lot of clay. And so the initial clay, we didn't mix with anything. We layered it at the bottom to be able to hold that water and to prevent any runoff from happening. Then we took the rest of the clay that we were going and we were mixing it. We mixed sand, expanded shale, and composts and manures, and we just started mixing it. And then we just started layer. It was still pretty dense, because it's just a mix. It hasn't really, you can see the amount of mulch we used. It's a little crazy. Don't laugh at me, Kara.
It is a lot. Doing it in scale. That's the hard part. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. It was very interesting. Sorry, hang on. So we were mixing all of those different components into the clay, but it wasn't, like, okay, it's time to plant. No, like those amendments needed time to start working together and start breaking down those things. And so we literally, what they called lasagna, the whole thing. It was heavy clay, mulches, manures, compost, all of that stuff. And then we even top dressed it with mulch after, because we did the layer of mulch and then we put soil on top and then we top dressed it with mulch to protect it, and we just continued to work the soil and then started cover cropping to see what would happen, see if we had any plant growth. Those are some really amazing volunteers that were in the trenches with us. But yeah, so there's those things like, I didn't put anything in here about cover cropping, so I do apologize, because cover crops are really important to amend the soil as well. Like right now we have cover crops going. I just threw a bunch of seeds together. So we have mustards growing that actually fumigate the soil. We have daikon radishes growing that aerate the soil. We have field peas, clover, oats, hairy vetch, all kinds of stuff. And so what that is going to do before it goes to seed, we'll cut it down and turn it in to provide organic matter, more organic matter into the soil. And the more organic matter you add, the more you keep building up this. So the mulch is going to start breaking down, but the more organic matter you add, it's going to build it up at the same time. So again, it's a symbiotic relationship. We just like to do things the hard way.
That's great. Is there a cover crop that you recommend, like starting with for people who are brand new to even starting a cover crop?
I think that's just going to depend on the soil test,
Okay.
Because different cover crops provide different things. Like for us, because we have so much mulch in our plots, it's going to rob nitrogen from crops. So we have a ton of nitrogen fixing crops, as you know, the mulch is breaking down, we're still putting more nitrogen into it. And the mushroom compost as well will help break down that mulch to prevent from the nitrogen from being robbed as much as it is. So
great. Yeah, so it sounds like peas would be a good nitrogen fixing.
Yes.
Yes. Then. Great.
But I will say, if you do cover crops, turn them in before they go to seed. Otherwise, they're just going to keep coming back. We have that problem right now in our second plot that we're working. We had put peas down 2 years ago, and they're still coming back, which is fine. But just FYI.
Because then they end up being unwanted, and unwanted plants are weeds then, of course. So, all depends on if you want it or not. You want it there.
I don't. So as you can see, you know, actually go back to the previous slide.
Sure.
So you can kind of see between the rows the difference. So that's compost. We've made rows. That's what we top dressed with, is with that compost. So top dressing, and we'll talk about it more. You know, there's different ways. You can look at it in different ways, rather. So we top dress the soil with compost to create these rows. Now, when you're talking about top dressing for plants, the plants are already existing. And when you're top dressing them, you're just putting compost around them, you know, to provide more nutrients for those crops or plants.
Kind of like a mulch, almost.
Sorry?
Kind of like a mulch. It's serving as a mulch to add water and keep it in there.
Right. So yeah, you can see the difference there in the soils. And I also recommend, you know, because we create so much food waste, to start composting your own food, so you don't have to continue. There's no reason you should go out and buy soil or compost. You know, you can make it all yourself. But I won't get into the whole composting thing. But if there's more info you want, I recommend the Texas Worm Ranch. Heather Rinaldi is the composting queen, and we usually get a lot of stuff from her. Worms, she does a lot of vermicomposting and stuff like that, but she knows a lot about that. So there's our one grassy area on the space. Somebody was like, you have to have grass. I'm like, why? And so
fight erosion. This is true. Yeah.
Was that?
It does fight erosion. Yeah.
Yeah.
They make a lot of roots. It's true.
Yeah. So you can go on to the next. I guess we just threw that in there because that's our beloved BCS. This is a walk behind tractor. They use it in the small scale farming space. It's amazing. You know, they have different attachments for it, but you can get a tiller, a harrow. There's a mower deck for it. You can get a rototiller. There's all kinds of stuff, but I love that machine. And it actually helps us. So like when you saw those rows, we'll lay 4 to 6 inches of compost before planting, and then we'll go over it with the BCS, and it creates these perfect rows. It's amazing. It's very satisfying. So here you have the two founders actually working together, and you can actually see in the back corner all of our different piles of stuff. There's mulch, there's sand, and if you can kind of see that clay in the front and how clumpy it is. And so that's what we started with. And let me tell you, leaves are nature's gold. It's better when it's like mulch leaves, but either way, it's still nature's gold. It creates, first of all, it's another way to mulch. But it creates a fungal, I'm losing my words right now.
Habitat.
Yes.
Habitat for them. Yeah.
Like the worms, everything that it's the leaf mold is everything your soil needs for the Oh, somebody said their lawn guy took their bags of leaves yesterday. No, that's why there's this big movement of when leaves fall on your yard, just mow them in. It is going to fertilize your yard so much. And so I was telling them earlier, last year I picked up it's the time of the year where I hook up to the trailer and just drive through neighborhoods and pick up bags of leaves. Last year I picked up 600 bags of leaves. Because it's just so great for the soil. And if you think about the forest floors, this is Steve mowing in those 600 bags of leaves I picked up. But if you think of the forest floor, it's like the most fertile soil that we have on the earth. And that's, you know, the leaves falling and staying there and decomposing and breaking down. And that's why there's so much life in those forests, you know, because it creates this amazing ecosystem for all the living organisms to thrive.
Right. So I did want to go back briefly. So if you wanted to create your own compost at home, it is good to have a balance of greens and browns. So leaves they fall in the browns along with the wood chips, but the greens are necessary to create that balance.
For sure. Although I gave you this slide, I typically do not recommend, I guess it just depends on the scale that you're doing, but I don't use grass clippings or any kind of weeds, because a lot of them go to seed and people don't know that, you know, and then you're constantly battling a weed problem.
That's true.
But that's where, you know, if you have your food that you start composting your food, you know, all those greens, all that organic matter mixed with all that browns is going to create the best compost that you need for your clay soil.
Yeah. And I think we did have a webinar with Lauren Clark from Turn, and she talked a little bit about compost. Georgianne, that's up online right now, right? I think it is. So I don't mean to make you come off mute, Georgianne, but it is also on the website. So if you want to learn more about compost, Lauren is an expert in that.
Lauren, Turn Compost, is one of our partners that's actually housed on our site. So if typically we would do once a month workshops, but that's just not happening right now. But yeah, we have volunteer days, and if you ever just kind of want to see what's happening, you know, reach out to us, and you know, if we're there, you're more than welcome to come by. If we want to schedule something, you know, that's great also.
Love it. Okay.
And look how, if you go back, I don't know if you remember when I first pointed out the grass, it was kind of brown, but look at how green it is now, you know? And that's a combination of what we'll talk about in a few minutes. We did a lot of fertilizing with compost teas. So that's what top dressing is with compost. And what Kara said, you know, it like mulching for your plants, but it's with the compost. It's providing those nutrients to the soil. And typically you do it regularly, you know, couple times each planting, you know, and the plants will tell you what they need. You know, they start showing signs of deficiencies, they're going to tell you what they need, and then you'll know what to do.
Okay.
Just more beautiful soil. Manures are really good. We use a lot of chicken manures because it's easier to access, and also worm castings, which are worm manures. We do use fish like in our compost teas, but you can get a lot of worm castings. So what our thing was, well, first of all, you know you have healthy soil when you have worms in it. But because we were building above ground, we didn't have worms. So we actually had to plant the worms in there. We had to order worms to bring them in for them to leave their castings behind. And the castings is just the manure. And, you know, they're also aerating the soil and all of that. But you want to be careful. It's usually manures from herbivores animals. So like dog manure, cat manure, all that stuff is not good for your soil. And so you typically want to make sure it's aged and dried, because the methane that comes from it can actually be a detriment to your soil and your crops. So yeah, it's easy. You can buy manures from the store, or if you have somebody that knows chickens or has chickens, and they're cleaning out their chicken coop, go grab it. That's what we do. Like, we have partners who are just farmers who have chickens, and they share their manures with us, and we mix it into, when I was saying earlier, the nutrients that we add before our planting, it's mixed into that azomite and blood meal and bone meal. And when I talk about blood meal and bone meal, that is something that we use based on the soil that we have. So that's why it's important to take that soil test and not just use methods people are telling you. Do you have anything on that, Kara?
Just that, yeah, I would be sure that the manure is from a good source, that it's already broken down. You definitely don't want to take fresh feces, put them in. So just be careful with that. And yeah, but other than that, it is rich in nitrogen, so it is a good source for plants.
The other thing to keep in mind, you can also use manures like horse manure, and one of our partners at eQuest, they do equine therapy, and they were saying they would give us their manures, but we didn't take it because they were vaccinating their animals. Now, if you're wanting to stay, if you're following organic practices, all of that, I don't recommend that. You need to, just like we have to know where our food is coming from, we have to know where the things are coming from that we're putting in our soil. And so because of the vaccines they were using on their animals, we didn't use any of that kind of manure. And this is just Steve adding those amendments to the soil. You just kind of just dust it on there. And then we take the BCS with the harrow in it that kind of disturbs the first few layers. This was after broad forking. And so all those nutrients will seep down into your soil and start helping break down that clay. So this photo was taken earlier this year, and it looks really sad. When COVID hit, we weren't ready to start producing anything. One, because we were still engineering the soil, but two, we didn't have irrigation installed, but we decided to put crops in the ground to see what would happen to fill the void of the food shortages that were happening when COVID hit. And I was excited about it, and then I quickly did not like it. One, because of COVID, we couldn't have anybody out, and this is a huge kind of, even though it's not 20 acres, a quarter of an acre is a lot of space to work, with just a couple of people. I'm glad we did it though, because it made, we saw that it still needed some engineering. We didn't do the soil test before we put those seeds in the ground. We just ran with it. So, and because of COVID, we didn't have volunteers. We quickly lost control of the weeds. And then I think the next slide will show you that weed. We got an infestation of nutsedge weed. So now, when I talk about like utilizing resources that you can get for free from people, there's a risk to that, because you don't know where it's coming from. You don't know, like even mulches, compost, whatever, there could be weed seed in that that you can't see. And this is what happened to us, because we have everything. We're nonprofits. We don't have a lot of funds to just bring all these things in. We use those resources, and then I've never dealt with nutsedge in my life, but it's worse than Bermuda, and I'm sorry to anybody that ever gets it, because there's no way of getting rid of it unless you spray it, or you literally have to dig it up. And so for 2 months, we're digging it up because we didn't want to have to deal with it again. So These are some tools you can use for weeding. I don't recommend, like we were using shovels for this, this nutsedge, because using a stirrup hoe or any of that is just going to break it, and it's just going to keep coming back. But these are, once you have your weeds under, go back for a second. I'm sorry. Once you have your weeds under control, these are really good tools to use. The initial piece to it is going to be a lot of hand pulling, making sure you get, you know, those nuts that are in there that are connecting all these different rhizomes and all of that. So there's the prevention of it, which mulches are good for that. A lot of people do tarp their areas where, you know, they don't have anything growing. And then there's these are different tools for removal methods. And pulling weeds is a discipline that you have to, like, it's a full-time job, you know? So it's really important that you, once you start those things, start your space and weeds start coming and you stay on top of it, because as you stay on top of it, eventually they'll go away, you know? But if you're not getting rid of them the correct way, they're just going to keep coming back. So after we got rid of all that nutsedge and I planted the cover crop, then this is what we have. And it makes my heart so happy. So this is what I was talking about, all the cover crops that we have growing right now. It's that mix of stuff that once it starts, before it goes to seed, we will mow it and then turn it in for it to break down beneath the soil's surface to create more organic matter and break down that clay some more. And there's our red Russian kale. And these are this is what you get when you start engineering your soil and putting those amendments in them. This is on the left. We've always been able to grow garlic. Garlic will pretty much grow in anything. So we don't ever get rid of it. On the right, what you see is what we call not us, but it's a wicking bed. And so, for a lack of a better term, it's like a self-watering bed. So what we did, there was one area that we did demo of the space, and we repurposed that concrete and made these beds out of it. I don't recommend doing it because it was the most back-breaking project there was. With that the concrete is heavy. But yeah, so we made the beds and we layered it with a billboard on the bottom, put some washed gravel in it, landscape fabricate. We put some straw and then soil. Oh, we did run a French drain through it. I'm sorry. And so what all of that does beneath your plants is it's holding water down there. It's not leaching out. And so these beds actually, I rarely water because it holds the water and the water wicks up to the roots. So if you go to the next slide, you can see, is it the next one? Or you can keep going again. So yeah, here we are, like they flourish all year, you know. We plant all of our herbs in there. And during the summertime in Texas with no shade, I probably water those once a week, maybe once every other week. So it's a good system if you're building a bed above ground, which Kara's going to get into later. But yeah, that's just another way. Like I said, we're going to have different demonstrations at that space on how to grow your own food. So one of our biggest things that we do is brewing compost tea. We do an aerobic system of compost tea, and I was telling Kara I don't really know how to translate the amount to use as far as on a garden, because we brew in 350-gallon IBC totes, but we use an aerobic system to where, and you can see it there, this is us on a veteran's farm doing a workshop, setting up a system for them for their property. But compost tea is really important. It's a mix of different nutrients. I'm going to show you. There's two different ones. You do a bacterial one once a year and a fungal one once a month. And it's just a mix of humus, worm castings, insect frass, kelp powder, fish emulsion, mycorrhiza inoculant, and blackstrap molasses. And the molasses in there helps the microbes plume. And I have, if you all are interested, our recipe for the compost tea that I am happy to share with you all. And it has all the definitions on what it does, what all of those amendments do. And because we do an aerobic system, it's supposed to brew for 24 to 48 hours. We stay at the 24-hour mark. Excuse me. But as soon as it's done, you have to get it out into the field right away, or your garden right away, because as soon as that that brew stops, then the microbes start to die. So the once it's done, so there's different delivery methods. There's the ground soak and the foliar spray. We do foliar sprays. There's conflicting, or not conflicting, there's arguments of ground soak versus foliar spray. We've just had better yields with foliar spray. With foliar spray, though, I will say if you're going to do it, you need to do it early in the morning, because if you do it when the sun is out, it can burn up your plants. So I don't know if you have an opinion on that, Kara.
No, that sounds great. Just that you don't want to spray your plants, especially the leaves, at night, because that's when you can start introducing not beneficial microbes to your plants and start spreading some bacteria and fungi that you don't want. So early morning sounds great. And I'm noting the time here, so we're just gonna breeze right along. And
so real quick, just to
that is, what is the difference between fungal and the other microbe one?
Fungal and bacterial. The bacterial one is like, we use the azospirillum, and it's a nitrogen fixing bacteria. Now, all the crops that we're using are already providing nitrogen. We need the bacterial space is what you need more, and that also, again, that depends on your soil test. So there is, putting that on the nitrogen fixing one more than once a year, because a lot of the crops already put nitrogen into the soil. It's just kind of overkill.
So fun fact, those nitrogen fixing plants aren't going to fix nitrogen without the right bacteria in that soil, because it's actually the bacteria that gets into those roots, forms little symbiotic spheres, and they take all the sugars, not all, they take enough sugars for them to survive, and then they in return give the plant nitrogen. They fix just atmospheric gas nitrogen from the air and create different bioavailable forms of nitrogen for the plants. All this to say, it is important to inoculate your soil with that nitrogen fixing bacteria so that those plants can do the awesome engineering that they're able to do.
I'm sorry I took up so much time. Moral of the story, love your soil. Understand the soil food web. Love your soil like you love yourself and your stomach.
Yeah. And just wanted to mention that Mill City Urban Farm talks about worms with their students. So kids are able to come by and work with them. So if you want to learn more about Mill City, just reach out to them. And our worm expert is actually housed in North Texas. We're fortunate to have Heather Rinaldi here with us. So she is a great person, really easy to talk to. You can ask her any question, and she's really patient with answering it. Take her class class is really good, very in-depth, very expert knowledge on how to maintain your own worm bin inside. And, oh, go ahead. Hyiat.
Just real quick, I wanted to mention, be on the lookout. Starting in January, we are working with Grow North Texas for the launch of the Beginning Farmer Rancher program with USDA, and there'll be all kinds of workshops from financial planning to figuring out what you want to do to production, all kinds of stuff.
Right. If you are growing in containers, we feel you. We understand what that's like because we are downtown. This is the El Centro campus. So we are creatively growing food in the city. And in order to do that, we have a greenhouse on the roof, which is pretty cool. And we're growing in containers. This container you can just pick up from your local nursery. It's also a self-watering container like the large wicking beds that Hyiat had talked about and showed you, but on a smaller scale. So it holds some water at the base there. That black tube runs all the way down to the bottom. You just water it through the black tube, and that encourages the plants to grow down to get that water from the base. And it encourages those roots to grow at the bottom of the soil, not at the top, so that they don't get fried from that heat. And it's a lot easier to keep those plants alive in a system like this because Texas summers, if you go away for a weekend and it's in a pot, it can be a death sentence to some plants. So when you're growing plants in containers, the larger container you have, the better, because that soil acts as a sponge, holds a lot of water that the plants need, but that also means that it dries out not as quickly. Okay, and Hyiat mentioned her friend who had a whole bunch of 5-gallon buckets. I'm one of those people too. I love 5-gallon buckets. Not all HOAs enjoy or appreciate 5-gallon buckets the way I do. So you can also get some more decorative buckets at a local nursery that look a little bit cleaner than some of these 5-gallon buckets, although I'm still partial to them. The key takeaway here is that volume of soil, the size that you want to aim for. It's a fair amount of soil for one plant or for a couple plants. So potatoes, I recommend growing in containers about this size because potatoes are super easy to grow. They're really low maintenance. And I think the shoots actually look really lush and beautiful. And then at the end, when it's time to harvest them, it's like an Easter egg hunt, finding all those potatoes in that soil. And it's really easy too, because you can just dump it out on the ground to find all those potatoes. Don't have to worry about getting a shovel or a pitchfork out. And of course, you can grow in smaller containers. They just need to be watered more frequently. We call these a little micro container garden. And these are some parsley plants that are growing at El Centro campus. But you can grow all types of different fruits and vegetables in containers. So definitely check those out.
Beautiful pictures. Yeah.
And this is a picture of the live wall that's at El Centro. So it's really helpful because it is hooked up to a timer in an irrigation system. So it turns on twice a day to water those plants. If you're at an institution, your workplace wants to install something like this, your school wants to install something like this, there is a fair amount of upfront costs, but once it's hooked up, it's a lot easier to maintain than having someone out there watering constantly. So this is called a live wall, if you want to look that up. And with that, we also have more webinars posted online. I didn't get too in depth with containers because it's just a shout out to everyone who is growing in a place where you may not have land to regenerate, but wanted to still let you know that is possible for you. And if you haven't heard yet, we are offering agriculture courses at Dallas College now. And this spring, it's all 100% online. We're going to offer 4 different classes: computers and ag, agronomy. So agronomy would be talking a lot about those cover crops and different things that we talked about today. ag econ, and then wildlife conservation and management. And if you're just interested in some more free tips and hacks on how to grow your own food at home, definitely follow us on social media. We'd love to connect with you outside the classroom as well. And those are our social media pages. But again, we're just so happy that you joined us, and we're so happy that Hyiat was able to join us today. And we hope to connect with everyone soon. Hyiat, did you have any closing thoughts?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for having me today, and to stay on top of anything that we're doing, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook. Those are kind of the only two that we have nailed down so far. But all of our social handles are at Farming Veterans. So feel free, and then you can connect with us through those spaces, or you can go to our website. So thank you for your time, and I'm super grateful for all of you all.
And we are grateful for you and Kara. Thank you so much for this fabulous presentation.